I'm Tara Nelson from CTV Calgary, and we're welcoming viewers from across the province and the nation this evening. This broadcast was organized by a consortium of media outlets, CTV, CBC, Post Media, and Rogers, and it is going out live across the province and the country on TV, radio, the web, and social media platforms. I will be moderating tonight's debate, coming to you from the CTV Edmonton studios. We have just 90 minutes for the leaders to discuss their platforms and convince you why they should be the next premier of this province. So let's get down to business and welcome the four contenders. We have invited the four leaders of the parties which elected members to the legislature. From the Alberta Party, Stephen Mandel. From the New Democratic Party, Rachel Notley. From the Liberal Party, David Kahn. And from the United Conservative Party, Jason Kenney. Welcome to all of you tonight. Let me introduce you next to our panel who will be putting the leaders on the hot seat tonight. From CBC, Provincial Affairs reporter Kim Trinacity. From Post Media, legislative reporter Emma Graney. From Rogers, City News Edmonton reporter Courtney Theriault. And from CTV Edmonton, News at 6 anchor Aaron Isfeld. So this is how the debate will work tonight. The leaders will have 1 minute each for an opening statement. Then we will begin with questions from our panel, questions that are based on suggestions sent to us by viewers across the province. We thank the many Albertans who sent them in. Each leader will have 45 seconds to respond. And then we will be opening the floor for a free debate involving everyone. This is going to be the format for every question. And we will conclude the debate with closing statements, again, with equal time for each leader. Now, the leaders have not been provided the questions ahead of time. They have been told which themes we will touch on. Leaders, you can see that you have a clock in front of you so you can see how much time you have left. We will be strict on the timed segments so it's equitable for everyone and also so that we can have a little more flexibility during the free debate. Now, to decide which leader would speak first, we did a draw, and Rachel Notley from the NDP will begin. So, Ms. Notley, you have 1 minute.
Good evening. I started this campaign by asking who is fit to be your premier. There are some who want to give big corporations a big tax gift while cutting wages and putting our schools and hospitals into harm's way. I disagree. I will diversify the economy, fight for jobs and pipelines, and defend our schools and our hospitals. There are some who want to go back to old ideas that have failed and have left us in a difficult situation. I am focused on the future, on going to where the puck is going to be, not where it was. And there are those who are beholden to extreme fringe groups who want to invite that extremism into your government. I believe that equality is a fundamental Alberta value, and we are better when we stick together. Alberta is at a crossroads, and we have a big decision to make. I ask for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Notley. Now, Jason Kenney from the United Conservative Party, you have 1 minute.
Welcome to what I hope will be a good discussion about how to get Alberta back to work. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? For too many Albertans, the answer is no. For 4 years, we've lived through economic decline and stagnation. Nearly 200,000 Albertans are out of work and 43,000 more looking for work than when the NDP came in. Family incomes are way down and bankruptcies are up. Behind these numbers is the human cost on people's lives. More crime victims, more addiction, mental health challenges. This election is about those people and how to get them back to work. How to create jobs, grow our economy, build pipelines, and stand up to those like Justin Trudeau and the special interests who have landlocked our energy. Tonight, I'll be talking about our plan for positive change. Change that replaces a high-tax, high-debt ideology with a common-sense job creation strategy that scraps the carbon tax, protects our public services, and gets a fair deal for Alberta.
Thank you, Mr. Kenney. Stephen Mandel from the Alberta Party.
Good
Your
evening.
1 minute begins now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Mandel, and I'm running to be the Premier of Alberta. I know a lot of you tonight don't know what to do. Many of you want to get rid of the NDP. We've also got some serious reservations about Mr. Kenney's UCP, and you're worried about the prospect of a Jason Kenney government. It's a no-win choice, and you're scared about splitting the vote. We hear that all the time at the doors. You're scared of accidentally electing the wrong person. I understand your fear. I know where it comes from. Mr. Kenney and Ms. Notley have made this selection so polarized, it's hard to know what really to do. But I ask you tonight to set aside your fear and take a good, long look at the Alberta Party and what we offer. Because we don't think you should have to choose between a good economy and a kind society. You should be able to have both. That's what we want to do in 2019, and that's what we offer.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel. David Kahn from the Alberta Liberal Party, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Alberta Liberals have smart, common sense solutions for the serious problems we all face today. We have the boldest pro-growth strategy of any political party in decades. Alberta Liberals will put more cash in your pocket. We will eliminate income tax for 70% of Albertans. We will add an HST to provide stable revenue and get Alberta off the resource roller coaster. We will create more jobs, and we will fight to get the Trans Mountain Pipeline built. We will improve healthcare and reduce wait times. We will cut classroom sizes to give your children a better education. Alberta Liberals have bold ideas for a better tomorrow. I have the vision to move this province forward. We will make life better for all Albertans.
Thank you, Mr. Kahn. That concludes the opening statements. We are off to the races. So we begin with the first question from our panel. That first question relates to intergovernmental relations with Ottawa. With that question is CBC Provincial Affairs reporter Kim Trinacity. Kim's question is directed first at Stephen Mandel, who will have 45 seconds to respond.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening to everyone. Well, some feel at this point in Alberta's history that our relationship with Ottawa isn't very good and that Albertans really aren't benefiting all that much. So if you were Premier, how would you work with Ottawa to improve that relationship and ultimately the outcomes for all Albertans?
Thank you. First and foremost, I think people have to understand we're proud Albertans. And we've done so much for this country. And there's a misunderstanding across Canada at the contribution we've made. Our oil sands have been an amazing development that has contributed billions of dollars to our country. As a result of that, there seems to be this misunderstanding of what we're doing in Alberta. I think, begin with, we must create a relationship with the federal government that they understand who Alberta is. Treat us fair, treat us equitably, because if we're going to continue this conflict relationship we seem to have now, we're never going to get anything settled. Let's work together, but they need to understand that Alberta has a position they must respect.
All right, Mr. Mandel, thank you for that. Mr. Kahn, you now have 45 seconds to answer.
Albertans are right to be angry at Ottawa, BC, and Quebec. The truth is we're not being treated fairly. However, hot-headed actions and misleading rhetoric are getting us nowhere. The Alberta Liberals were the only party to stand against the turning off the taps legislation. Why? Because hurting our own industry just to hurt our neighbors isn't a strategy. It is a political stunt designed to create the illusion of strength. I believe real strength comes from fostering cooperation and making good deals. I believe in Canada and I believe in Alberta. It's time to do away with silly and inflammatory ideas and start building coalitions.
All right, Mr. Kahn, thank you. Ms. Notley, you now have 45 seconds, starting now.
Well, thank you. You know, successive governments in Ottawa have failed us. I know Albertans are angry. I'm angry too. I'm frustrated. But Mr. Kenney has been trying to say that I should just be picking fights and nothing else, not actually trying to work with Ottawa in a determined way. That might make me feel good, but it's actually not going to get a pipeline built. My job's to stand up for Alberta, to advocate for Alberta. That's what I've done, regardless of who's in power. That's why we got the federal government to buy a pipeline. And that is what leadership actually looks like.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Kenney, you have 45 seconds for your answer.
Premier Notley has made a disastrous deal, an alliance with Justin Trudeau, and all we had to show for it is a jobs crisis, no pipelines, and a carbon tax. We have laid out a detailed plan to fight for a fair deal for Alberta in the Federation, to keep our tax dollars here, to sue the federal government for invading our jurisdiction over oil and gas through their No More Pipelines Law, Bill C-69, to join 4 other provinces in suing the federal government to prevent a federal carbon tax from being imposed on us. And I will make it clear to Justin Trudeau that if we do not get a fair deal in the Federation, if we do not get a coastal pipeline, I am prepared to hold a referendum on removing the principle of equalization from the Constitution of Canada.
All right, Mr. Kenney, thank you. Let's move into the free debate portion on that question then for a few minutes. The other leaders, all leaders can jump in at any time. Let's try to do this one at a time, though, for the audience at home, please.
Well, Mr. Kenney, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Mr. Kenney, here's the thing. I find it very ironic that you're interested in suing the federal government over equalization when it was actually the Conservative government that you were a part of that actually wrote the formula that you currently want to sue over.
Premier.
I think the fact of the matter is that we need to have a determined approach to Ottawa. We can't simply take 30-second media cycle political grandstanding strategies as a means of actually securing a goal that Albertans need us to focus on. And that's the difference in our leadership. I'm focused on the goal. I'm not focused on the political game one night versus the next night. I'm focused on actually
Premier,
getting the pipeline
I truly
built.
respect
And you know
your leadership.
what? After 10 years in Ottawa, you didn't get a pipeline built.
Premier,
and so there is truly no reason why we should take advice from you on this.
4 pipelines were built. One was approved, Northern Gateway, that you opposed. Premier,
no, that's
I respect
absolutely
your,
not true.
If I could, please, Premier, if I could finish. Premier, I respect your leadership, but you made a disastrous mistake with the alliance with Justin Trudeau. You sold Alberta down the river to your ally Justin Trudeau. All we got was his cancellation of Northern Gateway, his killing of Energy East, your joint surrender to Obama's veto on Keystone XL, your surrender to your BC New Democrat friends on their obstruction over Trans Mountain's expansion, Bill C-69, Trudeau's No More Pipelines law, Bill C-48, his tanker ban.
Mr. Kenney, really, I mean, you are entitled,
The
Mr.
day
Kenney.
he announced his tanker ban, Premier, you didn't raise a word of protest. You've surrendered to his federal carbon tax. You want to raise your carbon tax by 6%.
I must really jump in here because
if we could have one person talk at a time, I'd like to bring Mr. Mandel.
Yeah, thank you. I think both of you are culpable in this issue. You know, Ms. Notley, you've developed this relationship with Trudeau. We've had to absorb this carbon tax in order to get a new pipeline, which we don't have. But Mr. Kenney, you were in Ottawa for such a long period of time. You know, equalization was under your control. You could have changed it, but you didn't.
Actually,
so
it was
all of a sudden now you're fighting about something by having a referendum. It's ridiculous. We're going to have a referendum here says we're going to change the program. In Ottawa, equalization is a federal program. We need to sit down and show Ottawa that we're contributing so much more to this country financially that there has to be more equity. Equity is what's being lost this whole program. The federal government seems to think Alberta's this cash cow that they can go after for money constantly and then treat us unbelievably poorly with Bill C-48, C-69, not building a pipeline. The federal government really is incredibly culpable in this. I blame Ms. Notley for not fighting hard enough either.
Unfortunately, I'm the only person up here who's a constitutional law lawyer who understands the Constitution and how it works. Mr. Mandel, you've got a ridiculous platform on equalization payments and unilaterally amending the Constitution. Mr. Kenney, you know full well that a referendum will not magically amend the Constitution and change the equalization.
What it will do is elevate our fight. It will elevate
preying on people's economic anxieties, and you're selling them a bill of goods.
I'm talking about using.
Mr. Kenney, you respond, please, and then Ms. Notley.
What I'm talking about is using the 1998 Quebec secession reference of the Supreme Court. Says if a province holds a referendum on a constitutional amendment, it forces binding negotiations. Let's take a page out of Quebec's playbook. They've so effectively asserted their interests in the Federation. Let's elevate our fight for fairness to the top of the national agenda. Let's allow Albertans to vote on deleting Section 36, equalization from the Constitution, if we don't get fairness. We need leverage. We need leverage to get fairness in the Federation.
There's an amending formula in the Constitution, and it doesn't involve a referendum based on the Quebec secession reference. You know better than that.
We've got about 30 seconds left, Ms. Notley.
Listen, you know, we've got bluster coming from Mr. Kenney. Here's the thing. Pipelines, pipelines, pipelines. I've just now said the word 2 more times than Mr. Kenney did when he was a cabinet minister, allegedly representing downtown Calgary the whole time he was in Ottawa. What I've done is I've taken a clear approach to build support for pipelines across this country, talking to people who are in support, but also those who aren't in support. And as a result, we've moved the dial. We've gone from 4 in 10 to 7 in 10 Canadians supporting pipelines. And that is why we got the pipeline purchased by the federal government when it almost died. And let me just be very clear. When it comes to Gateway, the federal court actually referred to the incompetence of the Conservative government, of which Mr. Kenney was a part, as the reason for why they had to kill that pipeline.
We're going to wrap it up on that.
We are closer than ever.
Thank you very much.
And it is because
leaders, thank you very much. We're going to wrap it up on that particular issue. We're going to wrap up the free debate on that particular issue and move on to our second question. Thank you to the leaders. Our second question from our panel of journalists. This question relates to the provincial economy and Alberta's reliance on energy revenue. We'll go to Post-Media Legislature reporter Emma Graney. Emma's question is directed first at David Kahn, who will have 45 seconds to respond.
So Alberta is facing a growing debt level and a widening deficit, and it's become clear the province can no longer rely on energy royalties. So if you were Premier of Alberta, what would you do to balance the budget and find other revenue streams?
Thank you, Emma. That's a great question. The Alberta Liberal Party is the only party in this election putting forward a pro-growth fiscal strategy to right our provincial's finances and get us off the resource roller coaster. I'm talking about replacing most provincial income tax with an HST. Now, Mr. Kenney has referred to economists such as Trevor Tombe and Jack Mintz for his proposition that the carbon tax should be scrapped and for corporate tax cuts. What he doesn't tell anyone is all of those economists have said that we need a sales tax to stabilize our revenue, and we've got the plan to replace income tax with a sales tax, and it's the only plan that's a pro-growth strategy, and it's the best plan that any parties have in this election.
Thank you, Mr. Kahn. Mr. Kenney, you now have 45 seconds.
The NDP is digging us into a debt hole of well over $100 billion that risks our future and our public services. We can't continue in that direction. That's why we've proposed a balanced plan to get to eliminate the deficit within one term, within 4 years, by focusing on getting the economy growing, by creating jobs so there's more people paying more taxes. And then secondly, by actually bringing in some reasonable control over government spending. We spend more than any other province on a per capita basis. So through spending restraint without cuts and through economic growth, we would get to a balance within 4 years without trying to wish our way out of the debt hole. The NDP has an $8 billion hole in their plan because they're trying to wish their way out of it through unrealistic growth projections.
Thank you, Mr. Kenney. Ms. Notley, you now have 45 seconds.
Well, the issue of fiscal security is absolutely an important question. When we were elected 4 years ago, times were tough. We inherited a very difficult situation, and government revenue was in free fall. So we made the decision to have people's backs, not make the situation worse. And we laid out a plan at the same time to balance the budget in 2023. You won't hear it from people here, but in fact, we have either met or exceeded our targets on that plan. And we will balance in 2023. But when we do, what we will also have is strong schools and strong hospitals. And we will not have made reckless cuts in the process.
All right. Thank you very much. And Mr. Mandel, you have 45 seconds beginning now.
Thank you very much. As a former mayor of the city of Edmonton, we're obligated to have balanced budgets. The province mandated every city to have a balanced budget. We could not go into debt unless we had ways in which we could pay for it. And as the only business person up here, you have to find ways to balance your spending with your revenues. Otherwise, you're going to go broke. The challenge, though, is the two individuals that have put forward, UCP and the NDP, their budgets, they don't make any sense. If you spend time looking at the current budget, you'll see that it's so out of whack that by 2023, the assumption is there's going to be $10 billion in royalty revenue, and that's going to create the balance. It makes no sense. We need to create jobs, we need to create opportunity, which will increase revenue, and that revenue will allow us to eventually balance the budget. But jobs are far more important at this point in time.
Okay, thank you so much, leaders. We'll now move into our free debate.
Premier, when you came to office, we had a debt of $13 billion after the entire history of our province. Under your leadership, you've been running the largest deficits per capita in Canada. Your debt is now $54 billion, and your plan takes us to $108 billion. Expert economists have said that there is no credibility in your plan. We hired an independent firm that says you are overestimating revenues by $8 billion. And so you are digging us. I hope you understand, Premier, you're headed towards $4 billion in interest payments. You're already spending more in interest on 17 of the 21 government than you are on 17 of 21 government departments. We can't continue to dig into this debt hole, Premier.
If I could, please. It is really quite rich. First of all, we are relying on numbers from Treasury Board and Finance. And quite honestly, I mean, you've lost $2 or $3 billion in your estimates because you don't understand the rail deal. But more to the point, you are blowing a $4.5 billion hole into our budget in order to give away a great big tax cut to corporations with nothing guaranteed in return. And in so doing, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it by freezing healthcare and education. So I ask Albertans, do you want to pay for a tax cut for your boss by freezing your kids' education and freezing your loved ones' healthcare? There is a better way. We don't have to go down that path.
Ms. Notley, I'm going to cut you off there and bring Mr. Mandel in.
Thank you. We have to be realistic. In both cases, the deficits we're facing are substantial, but we have to deliver service to Albertans, and we have to create jobs. It's unrealistic to expect to balance the budget in the next few years, because we will be balancing in the back of Albertans who need services. We believe it will take time, but we need to deal with this massive debt. I think that's one of the things that we've not dealt with very well. We have a $55 billion debt at the point in time. I think it's closer to $85 billion if you look at the balance sheet, you look at the liabilities versus what kind of assets we actually have. I think we need to put a plan in place that looks at those liabilities and find ways to turn them out, because they're going to kill us. If we have an increase in interest rates by 1 or 2%, it's going to cost us $5 or $6 billion a year.
Mr.
Let
Mandel,
me finish.
I'd like,
Let me
if
finish.
I could, Mr. Khan would like to jump in at this point as well.
It's going to cost us
Mr.
$5 or
Khan.
$6 billion a year in interest. It's going to cripple our economy.
Mr. Khan.
It's really rich for Mr. Mandel, who was part of the previous PC government, and Mr. Kenney, whose MLAs were part of previous Conservative governments, to be talking about fiscal probity when we have been left with a heritage fund that has no more money in it than when Mr. Lougheed stepped down in the 1980s. So for Conservatives in this province to talk about fiscal issues and having a proper plan for our province is really rich. It's only the Alberta Liberal Party that has the strongest fiscal plan in this campaign. Economist Trevor Tombe called it the most pro-growth idea of the campaign. It is only the Alberta Liberals that have put forward a plan to get our finances in order and have a stable revenue stream to pay for our health care and education, and to get off that resource roller coaster that we have been on since 1943. And during 44 years of Conservative one-party rule, we were on that roller coaster, and the budget was never balanced without resource revenue.
Mr. Kenney, you
only way
respond
to
first.
stop digging into a $100 billion debt hole that risks our future and our public services without reducing spending on key public services is to grow the economy. That's what this debate and this election is about, getting people back to work. Now, the Premier just once again trashed businesses and employers who actually create the jobs in our economy. She came to office promising to raise royalties. She raised taxes on employers' incomes, property, helped Mr. Trudeau raise payroll taxes and her carbon tax, increased red tape.
Might I get in at any
and led
point?
to an economic crisis in this province where some say we're in our second recession. We need to turn that around, which is why we're proposing the job creation tax cut that Professor Mintz says would create at least 55,000
If I might.
Professor Mintz,
We've got about
If I
30
might-
seconds left on this question, please. I'm going to bring Ms. Notley in. One at a time, please. I'm going to bring Ms. Notley in. You've got about 30 seconds.
If I could, first of all, let us just remember this. We have the best balance sheet in the country right now in Alberta, and we will have the best balance sheet in the country when we reach balance. But let me also say, your plan to blow $4.5 billion hole in our deficit for a corporate tax cut with no guaranteed return of any kind is deeply irresponsible.
55,000 jobs is a big return.
And we have a focused plan that will cost much less than that to create 75,000 jobs and
15
finally
seconds. Can you wrap
diversify
up
our
that thought,
economy
please?
in a way that Conservatives have ignored for 2.5 decades. At the end of the day, we should not be paying for this corporate tax cut by freezing our healthcare and freezing our education the way Mr. Kenney wants you to do.
We're out of time on that question. Thank you, leaders. That concludes our free debate on that question. We're out of time on that question. Thank you. We're going to take a quick 2-minute commercial break. We will be right back with the 2019 Alberta Leaders Debate.
Hi, I'm Rob Brown. You've been watching and listening to the Alberta Leaders Debate on CBC TV, Radio 1, and online. As you heard, the debate will continue after our media consortium partners take a quick commercial break. In the meantime, we thought we'd get some early thoughts from one of our regular political pundits, Janet Brown, a pollster based here in Calgary. She joins us now in studio. So what do you make of what you've heard so far, Janet?
Well, I expected the debate to get contentious. I didn't expect it to get so contentious right out of the gate. But, you know, all the party leaders have come with their best game, their key talking points, and they're really, you know, attacking each other quite hardly.
Yeah, and we're seeing those two key party leaders out front in the polls. Rachel Notley and Kenney focused on each other almost exclusively. In fact, the first opportunity for free debate Notley wasted no time. She went right after Kenney.
Right. And Kenney, in turn, when he had his first opportunity, he went right for the Premier and her disastrous economic policy.
So expect to see more on that. Thank you, Janet. Okay, now we want to know what you think of the debate. We're streaming it live via our CBC, Edmonton, and Calgary Facebook pages. So if you haven't already, get on there and drop us a comment or a question like Melissa Johnson did. She writes, what are the plans for our government to get those on the streets a home, raising the prospect of homelessness not getting enough attention in this election campaign. She says it's a right that belongs to all Albertans. Leanna Emerson writes, don't scrap the carbon tax, a key pledge from Jason Kenney in the UCP. She says it works. We're going to highlight a few more of those comments on Facebook in the next commercial break after we hear more from the leaders. Again, David Kahn, Stephen Mandel, Rachel Notley, and Jason Kenney squaring off right here on CBC TV. See you in just a bit.
Welcome back to our viewers and our listeners across the province, joining us on TV, radio, online, and social media tonight. This is the 2019 Alberta Leaders Debate. If you're just joining us, we're pleased to have the leaders from the UCP, Liberal, NDP, and Alberta Party with us. The leaders are taking questions from our panel of journalists tonight. Each leader has 45 seconds to respond, and then we open the floor for a free debate involving everyone. Now, as we come out of the debate on the economy, many people, of course, feel the way to get the economy kick-started is to build pipelines to move oil to market. Courtney Theriault from City News Edmonton has that next question. It is directed first at Jason Kenney, who will have 45 seconds to respond.
Thank you, Tara. I think it would be fair to say that much of the discontent in Alberta right now relates to the inability to get pipelines built. The current price differential for Alberta crude is hurting Alberta companies, government revenues, and ordinary Albertans. So what would you do as leader of Alberta to address this?
Great question. First of all, what I would not do is what our Premier did shortly after taking office when she said Alberta was, quotes, the embarrassing cousin that no one wants to talk about. That apologetic attitude is what invited the activism of these foreign-funded special interests that have so successfully landlocked Alberta energy. So we're proposing a fight-back strategy to move to a proactive and assertive approach. We would challenge the charitable status of groups like the David Suzuki Foundation in court that are funneling foreign money into our politics. We would build partnerships with pro-pipeline provincial governments. We would facilitate Aboriginal co-ownership of pipelines, a critical piece in this. We would challenge our energy companies to step up to the plate and more aggressively advocate for Alberta's ethically produced oil and gas.
Thank you, Mr. Kenney. We turn now to Mr. Mandel, and you have 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. We're proud Albertans of what we produce. The oil sands has been a remarkable source of revenue for this country. Over the last number of years, we've sent billions and billions of dollars across this country to subsidize programs every corner of our country. And it's a shame that when it comes time for Alberta to begin to do that again, to ship oil to the coast, we're being blockaded. It's difficult to ship oil to the south right now. So what we've done is we've come up with a program to ship out of, build a rail line out of Fort McMurray up through Alaska to Valdez. It's a great opportunity to get out of our country. There's an opportunity to do that. The governor of Alaska is already talking to President Trump about getting involved with it. We think that's one of the opportunities that we have in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel. We'll turn now to Mr. Kahn, and you have 45 seconds.
Well, I'm really happy to answer this question. I'm the only leader up here who's actually laid pipe in the Brooks area in one summer in my undergrad, so I've actually built a pipeline. We support the Trans Mountain Pipeline and other infrastructure projects. We're losing $80 million a day because it's not built. However, the current and past federal governments failed on Indigenous consultations and on the Marine Review, jeopardizing the project. The NDP failed to hold them to account. We will make sure consultations are done right and the pipeline is built responsibly. But there's no constitutional shortcuts like Mr. Kenney has suggested. He's spinning fairy tales to get votes. As a constitutional law lawyer specializing in Indigenous rights, I know what went wrong and what needs to be done to fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. And we turn finally to Ms. Notley. You now have 45 seconds.
Well, thank you. You know, fighting for this pipeline has been the fight of my life, and I've been doing that fight since I first got elected. Now, of course, I'm frustrated. We're all frustrated, especially by the most recent delays. But we can't act out of a place of anger as much as we may feel it, and as much as that might make us feel better. We must be smart and strategic. Now, my opponent, Mr. Kenney, wants to stoke fear and division for his political gain, but that is not leadership. Leadership is traveling the country, as I have done, moving support, or growing support for this pipeline from coast to coast to coast, and ultimately pushing the federal government to buy the pipeline when it was in jeopardy. It's not built yet, but I believe we will get shovels in the ground by this fall.
Okay, Ms. Notley, thank you. Let's now move into the free debate.
The problem with that answer is that this premier opposed Northern Gateway. She gave license to Justin Trudeau, her ally, to cancel Northern Gateway.
That is simply not true,
She opposed Keystone
Mr.
XL, and she and Justin Trudeau surrendered to Obama's veto on Keystone XL. This premier did nothing to push back meaningfully against Justin Trudeau killing Energy East. This government has left us with a faint hope of only one pipeline, and now we have Mr. Trudeau's Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines law, his tanker ban. We need to push back, in part, by making it clear to British Columbia that we are prepared to turn off the taps if they obstruct the flow of our energy, by telling multinationals like HSBC Bank that if they boycott Alberta, the government of Alberta will boycott them, by launching a public inquiry into the foreign sources of special interest money in the tar sands campaign that have so successfully defamed our energy, and working with First Nations to revive Northern Gateway by defeating Justin Trudeau's C-69, working with New Brunswick and Ontario to revive Energy East, doing everything we can.
If I could get in,
Juno
please,
Lab
Sarah.
or
One at a
Port
time,
Angeles.
please. Let's have Ms. Notley respond, and then Mr. Mandel.
Well, interestingly, the funny thing about all that is that not a single thing that you've talked about there is actually going to get the pipeline built. It's just going to give you lots of media. Your record in Ottawa is a decade of failure. We had a Conservative government in Edmonton. We had a Conservative government in Victoria. We had a Conservative government in Ottawa, and we did not get a pipeline to Tidewater built. What I've done is I've traveled the province, as I've said, or traveled the country, as I've said, and I didn't just talk to echo chambers of people who already agreed with us. I spoke to people who were opposed to pipelines, and I changed their opinions so that when Kinder Morgan was in jeopardy, at that point, the federal government responded to the very determined pressure that we put on them to buy the pipeline in order to save that pipeline and keep it in play. There is nothing that Mr. Kenney has done up until this point that has actually gotten us any further.
The reality is we still don't have a pipeline. The reality is we don't have enough pipelines to send our oil south. We don't have any pipelines to send it west or east. Part of that responsibility of Mr. Kenney and his government, when he was there, they could have pushed Northern Gateway through, but he didn't do that. The fact of the matter is Albertans are still waiting for the pipeline. Ms. Notley, I was there when you promised in the legislature that shovels would be aground last summer. They're not there. Every time we talk about this, we keep saying it's going to happen, going to happen, going to happen. I hope it does. We desperately need the pipeline. We need to put Albertans back to work. That's what all of us want. Everybody up here wants to do that.
Mr.
But the fact of the matter, it seems to me that we're going nowhere quick. Every time we turn around, every time we turn around, it's C-48 or C-69, or the federal government is making every effort to diminish the capacity of Alberta.
Unfortunately, most of what Mr. Kenney has said in his presentation just now is pure political theater. It's not going to get a pipeline built. It's just to buy votes and to play to the cameras and to play to Albertans' economic anxieties. I'm the only leader up here who is a constitutional law lawyer who knows what's gone wrong with those consultations, who knows what needs to be done to comply with the Constitution and get that Trans Mountain pipeline built. And I'm the only leader that has that experience working with First Nations across the country and knows what they need and require.
A quick rebuttal from Ms. Notley, please.
Well, the only thing I will say, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about it more, is that while we must do everything we can to get our oil to market and to get a pipeline built, in the meantime, Mr. Kenney is talking about canceling a fundamentally important rail deal that we put in place that will help keep the the differential down and get production moving. And he has absolutely no plan at all. His math on it is wrong. and it's also going to kill jobs in downtown Calgary.
got 30
So I look
seconds
forward
left.
to having a chance to talk about that because he is so
seconds left.
misinformed
With
on that
respect, you're
topic.
the expert in killing jobs in downtown Calgary. The rail deal, $4 billion, biggest expenditure in provincial government history for something the private sector was prepared to do. You've moved the risk and the cost.
They are not prepared to do it.
From
You're
tax,
picking winners and losers.
The oil companies already are moving the oil by rail. They already are.
One at a
already
time,
are.
please. We're going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much.
it's-
Let's keep moving. We have plenty of issues to cover tonight, so we're going to shift gears from the business of pipelines to social issues. The next question will be asked by CTV Edmonton's Aaron Isfeld. Aaron's question is directed at Rachel Notley, who, again, of course, she will have 45 seconds to respond.
In the first half of this campaign, we've seen a number of candidates who seem not to embrace a vision of acceptance and openness for all Albertans in regards to ethnicity, sexual orientation, or their belief system. Why do you see this as an important issue for this province?
Well, this is an issue that goes to the heart of who we are. And there are many issues that, quite frankly, have been settled in Alberta on protecting gay kids, whether we allow discrimination and racism to fester, whether women should have control over their own healthcare decisions. Quite frankly, Mr. Kenney's candidates have put those issues back on the front page by being fundamentally out of step with what it is Albertans believe. Moreover, he was presented with a fundamental test to his leadership just yesterday when we discovered the vile things that his education critics said about members of the LGBTQ community.
5 seconds.
He failed that test. Albertans deserve better in a leader.
Ms. Notley, thank you. Mr. Mandel, you now have 45 seconds.
Thank you. When we talk about the GSAs, we have to go to the children on the street. 40% of the children on the street today are from the LGBTQ community. That's a travesty. And why is that? Because somewhere along the way, they've gone home and their parents have said, we don't want you here. So the GSAs are to be put in place. We can protect children. And if we as a society cannot protect our children, what can we do? That's our number one job. We're going to educate them. We may have to make sure they feel comfortable. And at the same time, we need to make a safe and secure place for them, and the GSAs do that. That's one of the reasons we're creating a Ministry of Inclusion and Engagement, so that we can create a better atmosphere so people can have more discourse in the province, so
5
together
seconds.
we can find a better way to interact with all of our people.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel. Mr. Kenney, you now have 45 seconds.
We must respect the dignity of all people. We as Albertans judge people not based on how they pray or who they love or where they were born, but on how they treat others. I'm proud to lead the largest provincial party in Canada with 160,000 members and one of the most diverse teams ever presented in an election. A quarter of our candidates have identified themselves as coming from visible minority backgrounds. We have Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Jews, Christians, and others. We have people who came to this country as refugees, new Albertans. We've also proposed a security infrastructure program to provide grants to improve security around vulnerable community installations like mosques and Hebrew schools that might be targeted by hate-inspired violence. We must all join together in condemning hatred and supporting the diversity that I champion as Canada's immigration minister.
Thank you, Mr. Kenney. And finally, Mr. Khan, you have 45 seconds.
The test of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable. Alberta Liberals were the first party to support GSAs in Alberta. In 2014, we introduced legislation to protect GSAs that eventually pressured the PCs to implement their own and more flawed bill. Our party is founded on a belief in the value of all human beings, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, or gender identity. We believe in freedom and equality of opportunity for all. We support diversity and will fight back against racism, homophobia, far-right nationalism, and Islamophobia. I am running on a platform that will create equality of opportunity for all Albertans.
All right, Mr. Khan, thank you. And we will now open this issue into free debate.
Well, Mr. Kenney,
First of all, Ms.
go ahead.
Notley, you seem to go first. We'll try to go first this time. The reality is that the defining moment in a society is how we treat those that are the most vulnerable. I agree with Mr. Khan. This is so sad to see this has become such a political football. I don't understand why people just can't realize how important this idea of allowing kids to be protected in schools and allow the gay-straight alliances to move forward. It's a simple program. It allows kids to find their way and to be successful. This is so sad in our province that we're debating this over and over and over again. Mr. Kenney, yesterday, the challenges your Mr. Smith brought forward were terrible. And it seems time and time again, people within your party are coming up with those things, and they have to be disqualified. They have to come forward and comment about their particular phobias. It's sad. This needs to be moved forward in life. So allow these children not to be the political footballs I think they've become over the last little while.
Okay, Mr. Kenney, I'm going to let you respond to that, please, and then we'll bring in Ms. Notley and Mr. Khan.
I agree with Stephen and the other leaders here that we must ensure there's a safe place for LGBTQ youth in the schools, which is why we supported, both of our legacy parties supported the creation of what is Canada's strongest legal protection for gay-straight alliances. We do think those kids must have a right to have that peer support. And in fact, we are one of only 3 provinces in Canada with that kind of legal protection, which we would retain. At the same time, we believe that every child is unique and every circumstance is different. Under the Premier's bill, a child was recently taken out of class during school hours by somebody who wasn't, without the knowledge or consent of the parents, to go to a out-of-school conference. That's something I think most parents would probably be a bit troubled by. So all we're saying is that for younger children, those who might be facing emotional or mental health challenges, we should not be the only place in North America to create an absolute legal barrier to engaging the caring support of loving parents. This is not, as they characterize it, about outing gay children. That's offensive. No responsible teacher would ever reveal a child's sexual orientation. That's private information. But surely we should acknowledge that there may be cases where it's in the best interests of the child who may be bullied, who may be suffering from mental or emotional challenges, to engage the loving support of caring parents, and that parents should know if a kid's being taken out of the school for a field trip to a conference, for example.
All right, let's wrap up that thought. Ms. Notley, jump in, please.
GSAs, gay-straight alliances, save lives. And allowing kids who are part of gay-straight alliances to be outed puts them at risk. Mr. Kenney's caucus voted against Bill 24 when we brought it in. Moreover, in the last 3.5, his hand-picked education minister wrote a policy proposing to make it legal to fire teachers on the basis of their own sexual orientation. Mr. Kenney is not being forthright with Albertans when he talks about the idea that his party accepts and supports people in the LGBTQ community. They do not. And he had an opportunity to demonstrate leadership by moving those people outside of his party. He has a member of his party who equated the pride flag with the swastika, and he has not moved that person out of the party either. Rather, he's parroting his arguments today in this debate.
We've got about a minute left on this
leadership.
Thank you. We've got a minute left on this topic.
Better.
I want to bring Mr. Khan back in.
You know, it's unfortunate, Mr. Kenney, that you just don't understand the struggles that young gay youth go through and the struggles that they face many of them face at home. Gay-straight alliances are designed to be a safe place for those youth.
Agreed. And
they are designed to allow their peers to help support them when many of them do have struggles with their home environment. It was the Alberta Liberals that tabled the first legislation to protect gay-straight alliances, and your PC party actually was dragged kicking and screaming in the legislature in November 2014 into finally supporting them and finally passing a bill that was actually a carbon copy of the Alberta Liberal bill. So we know, Albertans know that they can trust the Alberta Liberal Party to protect diversity and to champion equality of opportunity. We're running on a platform that includes ending police carding, pay equity legislation for women, and a modernization of the Alberta Human Rights Act so that we limit the kind of discrimination that we're sometimes seeing in the workplace.
I'm going to jump in there now. We've exhausted our time on that question, and I thank you, and I will come back to you, Mr. Mandel. I know you wanted to get in on that one. So our next question we're going to move on to relates to leadership and trust. And with that, we go back to CBC Provincial Affairs reporter Kim Ternacity. Kim's question is directed first at Jason Kenney, and again, 45 seconds to respond.
Thank you. Well, in 2015, as we all know, after more than 4 decades of Conservative leadership, Albertans decided it was time for a change. Now you are asking them to, once again, to put their trust into a Conservative government, a variation of a Conservative government. So why are you, at this time, the right leader for Alberta?
Let's be clear, Kim. It's a very good question. The NDP was elected in the last election because Albertans legitimately wanted change. They concluded that after 40-some years, the PCs had become arrogant and the Wild Rose Party wasn't ready to govern. We've learned from those mistakes. We've created a new big tent coalition, the largest provincial party in Canada. We've committed to a democratic reform agenda that includes the right of recall, so voters can fire their MLAs if they betray the public trust, and free votes in the legislature. And so it's so important for us to maintain a culture of humility, to learn from the mistakes of the past. I think people understandably wanted a change of government last time, and I think they want a change of government this time to get our economy back on track.
All right, Mr. Kenney, thank you for that. Let's turn to Ms. Notley now. You have 45 seconds.
Well, in this election, Albertans have a clear choice. Who do you trust to be your premier? Now, Mr. Kenney is applying to be premier, and we deserve to understand his record. Many of Mr. Kenney's candidates have views that are demeaning to women, that are white supremacists, that are Islamophobic and anti-LGBTQ, and he has not dealt with them in a way that demonstrates leadership. Moreover, it is becoming clearer and clearer that people on Mr. Kenney's leadership team, at the very least, cheated for him to win the leadership. So the real question is this: if Mr. Kenney would cheat his own party members to have a chance at running to be premier, what will he do to the people of this province to keep the job?
All right, Ms. Notley, thank you. Let's turn to Mr. Khan now, and you have 45 seconds.
I'm the youngest political leader here. I'm from the next generation of political leaders. I know what younger people in our society want and crave. They want stability, they want good jobs, they want fairness in our electoral system. That's why we've the only party running on proportional representation, on regulating political action committees to keep big money out of our elections. And so young people and new Canadians know that they have an ally in me, that I know what they're going through. My father came here in the 1960s and had a great career in the oil patch, and I know what we need to do to bring new immigrants to the table, train them, and get them working in the workforce.
Okay, Mr. Khan, thank you. And finally, Mr. Mandel, you now have 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. One of the most important things about leadership is to have respect, listen, and work together with people. As former mayor of the city of Edmonton, that's what I did. It wasn't easy. We found coalitions built together so we could get things accomplished. That's one of the things that's so important right now. There's this divisiveness within our province that's scary. There seems to be top-down management of other parties. Our party is about coming together, about grassroots. We are grassroots, unlike some of the other parties. The reality is we believe that we can work together as a team. The Alberta Party has amazing candidates. I think if you look at the last little while, we have our candidates announcing different programs because we trust them. We know how confident they are. And so if we end up having a government, we have tremendous people to do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mandel. Let's launch into our free debate now. Mr. Mandel, why don't you start? You got a bit shortchanged on the last one. You go ahead.
I guess, well, I was just kind of pretty seriously attacked there. So
I will come right next to you, Mr.
Thank you
Kenney.
very
We'll
much.
let Mr. Mandel start.
I think this is... Leadership is about a lot of things. And, Ms. Notley, we experienced when the crossing of the floor with a few people, Ms. Luft and Ms. McPherson, they talked about bullying, and then there was also allegations of sexual misconduct within your department, within your office, and you made decisions to shuffle them under the table. You said you had investigations, but the fact of the matter, nothing came out. What ended up being is, everything was okay. You did things in a proper way. Nobody knows. Why didn't you make public what was going on? Or why didn't you have an independent investigator look at this so people could see that you were following the rules that you like other people to set?
Ms. Notley, respond, and then I'm going to Mr. Kenney.
Well, absolutely. Well, we did have an independent investigator, but let me just say that I know this is the issue of harassment in the workplace is an emotional one for a lot of people. It is for me as well. And part of rooting out sexual misconduct and harassment is creating the conditions for people to come forward. So the people that we chose to protect were the complainants who asked for confidentiality. Now, those aren't easy questions to answer. It's a tough balance to strike. That's what leadership is about. I hope we struck the right balance. But as Mr. Mandel noted, we did absolutely bring in an independent or two independent investigators. We followed their recommendations, and we've managed to protect the confidentiality of the complainants so that if other issues arise, people know that they can come forward.
Okay, Ms. Notley, thank you. Mr. Kenney.
A moment ago, the Premier just engaged in a drive-by smear against myself and our entire party. It's sad to see the Premier, whenever she does this, it's because she's incapable of defending her failed economic record, the jobs crisis, her alliance with Justin Trudeau, her carbon tax, her intention to raise it by 67%, her $100 billion debt. Whenever you hear that fear and smear, that's what's really going on. Premier, You know, you had a supporter the other day on social media who attacked Kaliche Madu, the Conservative candidate in Edmonton Southwest, a proud Nigerian immigrant to Canada, for supposedly supporting white supremacism. This is getting ridiculous. It's offensive. As the federal immigration minister, I welcome more newcomers to Canada than any immigration minister in Canadian history. I reached out to the full diversity of our ethno and cultural communities. Now, Premier, then you said, you claimed that I cheated in a leadership election, the results of which were confirmed by an independent auditing firm, by the independent leadership committee, by an independent firm that administered the vote with a margin of 17,000 votes. What you've just said is, quite frankly, defamatory. But Premier,
10 seconds
why
to wrap
don't you
up,
tell us
please.
who are the two members of your caucus who have been under charges for serious sexual misconduct?
Ms. Notley, respond.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I'm really sorry that you believe that people talking about your record is somehow negative campaigning. To me, it's talking about the facts. The leadership campaign of which you were a part is under RCMP investigation, Mr. Kenney. They are talking to the RCMP, who are investigating the wrongdoing. We have seen documents that have been released which show a clear connection between people in your campaign and Mr. Callaway's campaign. Is it normal for you to, do you think it's normal politics to run somebody as a kamikaze candidate in order to take down your most competitive
All right, we want to bring everybody in on this conversation. Please, one at a time. One at a time. Thank you.
The documents show us.
We want to bring everyone in on this conversation, Mr. Khan.
Bickering. We have the NDP that spent the first 2 weeks of the campaign attacking Mr. Kenney with attack websites, with information from decades ago. We have Mr. Kenney that attacks the Premier every day, claims that there's some Notley-Trudeau alliance. Albertans are sick and tired of this kind of rhetoric. They want to hear real solutions to make their lives better. We have immense challenges that we've got to address in this province, and it's only the Alberta Liberals that are putting forward real policy to address those solutions, not pandering for votes, not attacking other leaders, but actually addressing the serious issues that we all face as Albertans and looking towards the future and where we've got to go to get our province back on track.
Okay, we have 30 seconds left. I'm going to give Mr. Mandel the final word.
Thank you. I mean, it is sad. On the one side, Mr. Kenney's attacking Ms. Notley, then Ms. Notley's attacking Mr. Kenney, and Mr. Khan is absolving himself of any responsibility of anything. Isn't this a funny little environment? But the fact of the matter is, we have to be concerned about the integrity of all of our politicians who might lead this province. We have to be concerned about sexual misconduct allegations, and they come out in the public. We find out really what happens. But most of all, we have to be concerned about bigotry and intolerance. That's something nobody can tolerate anywhere. And that seems to be something that's following Mr. Kenney's party ongoing basis. And that's very disconcerting.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel. We're out of time on that topic for now. We want to thank the leaders for their spirited discussion this evening. There's so much more to come. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back with the 2019 Alberta Leaders Debate.
You've been watching and listening to the 2019 Alberta Election Leaders Debate on CBC TV, Radio 1, and online. Hi, I'm Rob Brown, and I want to give you a heads up on what's coming your way after the debate. As soon as it ends, the very second, CBC will be bringing you a special show full of analysis about what you just saw and heard. You can catch it on TV, radio, and via Facebook, where the conversation has already kicked off. Janice writing, David Kahn is really doing a great job of representing the Liberal Party. Apparently lots of comments on our Facebook page saying the same. Adam writes, how about you fight for your platform instead of trash talking each other? My grade ones know how to communicate better than all. Harmeet writing, LGBTQ is in real danger if Jason Kenney wins. That segues nicely to Janet Brown, who's been watching this, Calgary pollster, of course, political pundit. Was that the most anticipated aspect of the debate so far, the focus on social issues, do you think?
Absolutely. I think that's what people are waiting for, the questions on social issues and also the questions on Jason Kenney's leadership and issues with his leadership campaign and integrity and stuff. So, yeah, this is the part that the part of the debate that people were waiting for.
Stephen Mandel focused on him, saying it's so sad. Obviously, Rachel Notley taking attacks. Well, how do you think Jason Kenney did underneath that scrutiny, handling it?
Well, it was interesting because, you know, he held his ground. He stuck to some of the talking points he uses many, many times. But no matter how often they went after him, he talked about a lot of things. You know, GSAs. He tried to talk a lot about immigrant populations. What he never did get around to talking about was the controversy around Mark Smith.
Okay.
He just would not go there.
Janet, we'll leave it there. But as mentioned, Janet will be back after the debate, along with a couple of other pundits and another panel I think you're going to find really interesting. Janet's brought some friends with her. More on that after this.
Welcome back. You're watching the 2019 Alberta Leaders Debate. The heads of the UCP, Liberal, NDP, and Alberta Party are with us, laying out their platforms for our viewers and our listeners across the province, joining us on TV, radio, online, and social media. The leaders are taking questions from our panel of journalists tonight. Each leader has 45 seconds to respond, and then we open the floor for a free debate involving everyone. So let's get right back into it. Our next topic relates to the environment, and with that question is Emma Graney, legislature reporter from Post Media. Emma's question is directed at David Kahn, who will have 45 seconds to respond.
Mr. Khan, another question from me. Aren't you lucky? Alberta has seen a massive flooding. We've seen lots of forest fires and things that most scientists agree are symptoms of climate change. Now, our economy here in Alberta is driven by the energy sector, which most scientists say does have a negative impact on the environment. So how will you balance the economy and jobs with protecting environment for future generations?
Thank you, Emma. That is a great question. For the younger people in our province, they know that combating climate change is the critically important issue to save our planet, our economy, and our entire way of life. It may not be popular, but a carbon tax is the most efficient way to reduce carbon emissions while not punishing the economy, as long as it's revenue neutral. Now, this is the problem with the NDP's carbon levy. They instituted it the wrong way. They didn't take proper advice from economists. Our Alberta Liberal plan will return all of that revenue to consumers and businesses so they're not hurt, but are encouraged to reduce their emissions. And we need to involve everyone, not just large emitters and our oil and gas industry. We all need to help.
All right, Mr. Khan, thank you. Let's turn now to Mr. Kenney. Mr. Kenney, you have 45 seconds.
We need to take the challenge of climate change seriously. That's why United Conservatives have proposed a levy on major emitters that would reduce carbon by about 70 megatons from our economy. But at the same time, we need to recognize the NDP's carbon tax is just a cash grab. It's all economic pain and no environmental gain. They hid it. They lied to Alberta voters in the last election about their intention to impose their carbon tax. They've already raised it by 50%. They intend to raise it by another 67% to please their ally, Justin Trudeau. And then the federal Liberals say it'll go up beyond that. This is making it more expensive to heat your homes and fill up your gas tanks. People were spending up to 70 to 80% effective tax on home heating gas this winter. That's why United Conservatives, as Bill number 1, we will bring in the Carbon Tax Repeal Act.
Mr. Kenney, thank you. Let's turn now to Mr. Mandel. You have 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. We all know that climate change is a very important issue, but so is the Albertans' problem of having to deal with cold weather and heating our homes and traveling long distances. If you live in rural Alberta, you don't just go around the corner. You don't have transit service, so you have to travel. The reality is every time we turn around, the solution is let's tax some more. Let's not be creative. Let's not find ways in which we can use the products we have. And I think an example we could do, rather than taxes, we could have encouraged canola producers. The issue with China right now, we use green canola and convert that into a support for petroleum products. Same thing with hybrid cars. Rather than telling everybody you have to pay taxes, why don't we give some kind of a subsidy? Take Mr. Trudeau's 5% GST and allow that to be subsidized by hybrid cars. There's lots we can do if we're creative.
All right, thank you so much. And let's turn now to Ms. Notley. You have 45 seconds.
Thank you. You know, this is a tough issue. Climate change threatens our communities, it threatens the health of our kids, and it threatens our economy. And the bottom line is this: Alberta can either lead or we can be left behind. Now, my opponent's plan is to leave our energy industry and our province behind. We can't entrust the future of our kids to a leader who ducks tough calls and wants to take us backwards. We have a Made in Alberta plan that rebates 2/3 of Alberta households, that supports families, supports Alberta businesses, and moves our energy sector forward. A plan is also getting results. Our air is cleaner. Our kids are breathing more freely. We cannot put that into jeopardy.
All right, Ms. Notley, thank you. So there you go, economy versus the environment. Let's move into our free debate.
You know, a couple of months ago, the Premier was asked by how much is her carbon tax on people heating their homes reducing emissions, and she said, I don't know, I haven't been briefed on that. The single most important policy of her government, and she can't even tell us what environmental impact it's having. But I can tell you what economic impact it's having. When we, as a Conservative government, scrap the carbon tax as our first bill of government, we will save families up to $1,150 a year. We will help to create 6,000 new jobs. We'll save small businesses $4,500 a year. And then if Justin Trudeau threatens to impose his federal carbon tax on us, we will sue him. We'll join the governments of New Brunswick, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba in challenging the constitutionality of the federal carbon tax. We can be responsible on the environment by putting a levy on the big industrial emitters. You know the single most effective thing we could do, though, to help global carbon reduction would be to get our natural gas to China and India, building LNG, liquefied natural gas infrastructure, so we can ship that to Asian markets, so they can convert from dirty coal to clean Alberta gas. That's a win-win for our energy producers and the global environment.
Ms. Notley, your response?
Well, you know what? Our plan has already reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 7 megatons. And to put that in amounts that people can understand, that is 1/3 the annual emissions of the whole province of Manitoba. So we are taking action to phase out coal emissions and breathing cleaner air already. Now, the fact of the matter is that Mr. Kenney's numbers on savings actually ignore the rebates that we are giving to families. It also ignores the fact that our plan is paying for flood protection in the city of Calgary, for the LRT, for the Green Line, and for a growing and exciting renewable energy industry, which had been left to fail for 20 years. And so we're making incredible progress. We just can't afford to go backwards.
Thank you, Ms. Notley. Mr. Mandel.
Thank you. One of the challenges with the program is it's going to take almost $2.5 billion out of the economy, and it's going to go into a slush fund. And if more money is collected, what's going to happen? It's then going to general revenues.
It's true.
In reality, it's almost like a sales tax.
With no more
rebates. We should call it maybe a sales tax, but it's a carbon tax. The fact of the matter is Albertans are suffering right now. We have one of the worst periods of economic times we've had in the province history. And yes, you give it back to 2/3 of the people. So a third of the population says, oh, we're responsible for all the carbon reduction. The other 2/3, I guess they don't care. They don't have to worry about it because they get all the money back. But what about the businesses that have to pay? There's so many businesses in this province that are suffering. They have all these additional costs. And that's where the carbon tax is having a tremendous negative impact.
We're
losing their jobs.
2 minutes left on this topic. Thank you, Mr. Mandel. I want to bring Mr. Khan in first, please.
And the Alberta Liberal plan is the only plan in which we care about the economy and the environment. That's why our plan would return all carbon tax revenue, every last cent, to consumers and businesses that are paying for it so that they're not hurt, but they are still encouraged to reduce carbon emissions because then they can actually make money when they have tax rebates and tax cuts. So we're the only party that's actually serious about both the economy and the environment. I think people that were looking at Mr. Mandel's party will be very sad to see that they clearly have no plan to reduce climate change except for talking about canola producers and hybrid cars. This is not the way to address climate change, and Albertans know that we've got to have a plan, but we want a plan that doesn't hurt our economy, that doesn't hurt Albertans in the pocketbook, but encourages people to reduce carbon emissions, and that's what our Alberta Liberal plan is.
All right, we've got 1 minute left on this, please, Ms. Notley, 30 seconds, and then we'll end with Mr. Kenney.
Mr. Kenney's plan will actually accelerate climate change. He wants to take the cap off of oil sands emissions.
Absolutely.
A plan which actually many energy leaders support. He wants to get coal back online and extend the life of coal so that our air gets dirtier and our kids have more trouble breathing. This is not a vision for the future.
Our major levy
the fact of the matter is that we need to be able to go forward making progress on combating climate change.
30 seconds left. That goes to Mr. Kenney,
to future
please.
generations.
Our levy
And you know what?
your emitters.
Leadership
One at
isn't
a time,
about,
please. I'm going to cut you off, Ms.
the
Notley, there,
election
please.
cycle. It's about
30
planning
seconds
for the
left,
future.
Mr. Kenney, please.
Our levy on
Final
major
word to
emitters
you.
will affect coal production. Premier, I thought you told us you were against the cap on the oil sands because your ally Justin Trudeau hadn't got a pipeline built. Are you switching back? You just talked about rebates, Premier, but you've announced that when you raise the carbon tax by 67%,
Actually,
there will
that
be
is
no
absolutely
increase.
not
There will be
true,
no
and I must
increase in
clarify that,
rebates,
and you
and there will
know
be no
that's not
increase
true,
in
Mr.
green
Kenney.
spending.
No, it's
and
not
by the
true.
way, Premier, we will carry over things like the LRT and the flood mitigation to the budget for infrastructure. But finally,
How exactly
10
will you pay
seconds and we're
for
going to
it?
move on.
finally,
Please wrap
we
up
will
that thought,
hold
Mr. Kenney.
we will ensure that no government can introduce a carbon tax in the future without going through Albertans in a referendum. So we can never have this kind of dishonest politics where the NDP foisted this on Alberta with the Albertans
We
without a
can't
We're
democratic.
out of
all
time
of
on that
the-
topic, and
all
we're
of
going to
the
move
trouble
on.
on
Thank you very
oil and
much.
gas
We've
companies.
run out of
We
time
all
on that
have to
topic. I'm
work.
so sorry. We do still have a few more issues that we really want to tackle tonight. So we're going to move on to our next theme, which is healthcare. With that question, we go to Courtney Theriault from City News Edmonton.
All right, this one is for Ms. Notley, and as we do take a look at the books, we see for many years that healthcare has remained the largest line item in the provincial budget. And at the same time, as many Albertans are aware firsthand, wait lists haven't exactly shrunk. So with an aging demographic, the demands on that healthcare system likely only going to increase. So what would you do to address this over the next 4 years?
Well, you know what? In the middle of the night, when you're worried about your baby's fever, you need to know that there's a hospital there for you and that you're not going to have to bring out your credit card to get into it. Now, my primary opponent in this election is proposing a massive corporate tax cut, which he's going to pay for by pretending he can freeze healthcare spending without it negatively affecting the care that Albertans receive. That's simply not true. And then he's going to pair it with introducing an American-style healthcare system where he creates one line for the wealthy and another much longer line for the rest of us. Instead of making things worse, like my opponent, we're going to invest strategically to reduce wait times. We've made some progress, but we also know, as mentioned, that we have to do better, and we're focused on doing just that.
Thank you, Ms. Notley. Let's turn now to Mr. Khan. You have 45 seconds.
The Alberta Liberal plan for healthcare is simple. Invest in sustainability. We are spending the most per capita of any province in Canada. With healthcare spending making up almost half of our budget, it's clear we have to drive down costs. We need to invest in preventative care in areas like nutrition, screening, team-based community care, and public health education. It's also time to finally take mental health and addiction seriously. Experts recommend that we spend 9% of all health spending in this area, and we're currently only spending 6%. However, the UCP would gut our public health care system, and the NDP would continue with unsustainable, costly systems where we're not spending smartly. We need to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Let's bring Mr. Mandel in now, and you have 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. You know, one of the greatest things Canada has and Alberta has is our healthcare system, the public healthcare system. So when you get sick in this province, and unfortunately I've had some experience with it, it's there to help you. And I think it's something that is so important to Albertans and Canadians that we must maintain our public healthcare system above anything else. But at the same time, we need to make sure we're delivering better frontline services, not having the waiting lines, and not spending money on frivolous areas like the laundry service or a new lab, when we can be putting investments back into our system. Our healthcare system is really one of the most important assets we have. We have to find ways to curb the costs. We cannot limit or eliminate any kind of services because our healthcare is too important.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel. And finally, we'll put this question to Mr. Kenney. You have 45 seconds.
One of the things that compelled me to get into provincial public service was my own family's experience. My father, who waited for over 14 hours in an emergency ward, effectively without care, dying later that day. How does that happen in one of the most expensive systems on earth? We cannot continue with a system that is so expensive but allows that to happen, that has growing wait lists as we spend more and more. I've signed a public health guarantee that we will maintain or increase funding in a publicly insured, universally accessible system. We're going to invest $140 million additionally to support to deal with the mental health and opioid addiction crisis. And we want a health system that puts patients first, get the administrative waste out of AHS, and push that money to our nurses and doctors.
All right, increasing healthcare costs. We're going to move into free debate and start with Mr. Khan.
both the UCP and the Alberta Party have talked about privatizing healthcare. Mr. Clark, yes, Mr. Clark was on QR77 last week, suggesting that your party would look at privatizing some parts of the healthcare system.
Didn't. I don't know where you heard that from.
And it's
not true at all.
And it's absolutely
absolutely not true.
It is true. First of all,
let's
second of all,
one at a time, please.
When you were a PC health minister, Mr. Mandel, you turned down federal funding for the opioid crisis. How many Albertans died under your watch while you turned down federal funding to help with that crisis? How many people died? We need to spend better. We need to spend on preventative medicine. We need to conduct value for money audits of the healthcare system so we know that our money is being spent on the front lines and not in the bureaucracy. We can do better, but it does not involve privatizing our healthcare system.
All right, let's bring Mr. Mandel in to respond, and then Ms. Notley.
Yeah, I'm shocked that Mr. Khan would talk about we would support privatization.
I was shocked hearing it on the radio.
Yeah, well, I don't know where you heard it from. Maybe you were smoking things you shouldn't have been smoking. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is our party supports public health care, and I can tell you, more than anybody else up here, I understand why it's needed. But as far as, I'm not going to go back and the accusations you make of when I was health minister, that was in a different government.
Was it not true?
I know it's not.
Were we not in a public health crisis back then with the opioid crisis?
But anyway, I'm not going to sit and argue with you about that. The fact of the matter is we need to find better ways to deliver the services. We need to allow our communities to have better decision-making locally. Too many of our communities are too far from the center of power in Edmonton. They want to get more opportunities to have the decision to make in their own community. For example, they want catheters in Red Deer in the hospitals. They want to do more things. We need to find a way to decentralize the system, create opportunities outside of Edmonton and Calgary.
Okay, Ms. Notley, where does the money come from to pay for the health care?
Well, you know, I'll tell you where it doesn't come from. It doesn't come from freezing health care and then asking people to reach into their back pocket and pay for it with their credit cards, which is in essence, Mr. Kenney has spoken very positively about models from BC, which involve basically people paying for access, paying to get onto a shorter wait list for certain types of surgeries. That means that there's one bit of health care for people with a lot of money in their back pocket and another type of health care for the rest of us. And that goes against my fundamental values as a premier and as a citizen. That's why we're focusing on a strategic investment in bringing down wait times. We know we can do better. We've brought stability to the system, but we know we can do better. That's why we're going to invest in more long-term care, more mental health. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for the contribution of your party to that issue.
Okay, so we can wrap up that
but we must protect our public health care system from an American-style intrusion, because that's not going to help all of
What you just heard was the classic old-school NDP Metascare campaign. Look, just as this government has the worst economic record and jobs record in modern Alberta history, they also have a terrible healthcare record. Since the NDP came to office, the wait times for open-heart surgery are up by 50%, for cataract surgery up by 30%, for hip replacements up by 30%, for knee replacements up by 23%. Children waiting for mental health services are waiting much longer than they were 4 years ago. And that's with a government that's spending more, with the most expensive system in Canada. We have to do something different. So what I've talked about is a healthcare surgical wait times guarantee to ensure a maximum 4-year wait time to get to surgery by emulating a hugely successful program from Saskatchewan, the birthplace of Medicare, where, yes, Premier, they do use competitive contracting to allow third-party contractors to bid into the system. They're able to do surgeries for 26% less cost. And they reduced, if I could just finish, they reduced wait times by 75%.
Okay, I'm going to give final word, please, on this. We've only got about 45 seconds left.
The private model is not why it works.
45 seconds left, Ms. Notley. I'm going to give final word to Mr.
because they invested more money. And you also like the BC model,
Pardon me if I can get a word in edgewise here.
Buying your way to final word to Mr. Khan. Thank you.
You asked the right
Leaders,
question.
one at a time. No one at home can hear you if you're all talking.
Where is the money going to come from? The money, only the Alberta Liberal Party has a bold fiscal plan to right our finances and ensure that we have stable, predictable revenue to pay for the health care that Albertans deserve. Only we are talking about full money for value audits of the whole healthcare system to make sure that we're not wasting money and making sure that it gets to the front lines, to doctors, to nurses, to emergency rooms, to paramedics.
Okay, we are out of time on the healthcare question. Thank you. We do have time for one last question tonight. Another big one like healthcare. The theme is education. education? That question is being posed by Aaron Isfeld. It goes to Stephen Mandel first, who will have 45 seconds to respond.
An estimated 15,000 new students will enter Alberta schools this fall. And we are still hearing about class sizes that are too big, schools that are outdated, new communities without nearby schools, and limited opportunity for those hoping to go on to post-secondary. So how would you address these issues if you were the Premier of Alberta? Mr.
Thank
Mandel.
you. You know, I've had the opportunity to visit my grandson's class, and I've watched the teacher care so much for the kids, but I've also seen the problems they face in the classroom, the complexity of classrooms that exist today. That's why we've added 50% numbers for the funding for teachers' aides. We also need to understand, if we're going to have a province that's going to grow, we have to have a strong post-secondary system. In the past, I believe there's not been enough money invested in it. We've diminished the capacity of that system. We have to create opportunities across our province, especially in rural Alberta. We need to create opportunities throughout our province, but in northern Alberta right now, there's great challenges getting post-secondary education for all of our students. So that's really important too.
All right, Mr. Mandel, thank you. Ms. Notley, let's bring you in now. You have 45 seconds.
Well, thank you. You know, I have 2 kids who are just starting out their adult lives, and like every parent, I want to know that the education system has given them the tools that they need to succeed. But let me paint you a picture of Mr. Kenney's plan for education. Kids learning from a curriculum developed before the internet in overcrowded schools, because no one's building new schools anymore, without a plan to hire any new teachers for the 15,000 students that come through the door every year that were referenced in the question. The fact of the matter is we need to set our kids up for success. That's why we are committed to funding enrollment, not freezing education, improving classroom quality, and continuing to build the schools that our kids need to learn in and to set themselves up for success in the 21st century.
Okay, Ms. Notley, thank you. Let's turn to Jason Kenney now. You have 45 seconds.
You know, just as the NDP is spending more in healthcare for longer surgical wait times, they're spending more in education for larger class sizes. We're going to have an audit to figure out where that money went, because the class sizes are too large. And we will build new schools. We're going to accept the NDP's entire infrastructure plan as our plan. But we need to focus on things like the huge decline in math scores for Alberta students. Our kids are falling behind the rest of the world. We're going to end the failed experiment with Discovery Math. We will modernize the curriculum, and we'll take some of the ideas the NDP's worked on, but we want to develop it in an open and transparent way. And finally, we want to make sure that there's a proper assessment of students so that teachers can intervene to help them when they need it, and that there are clearly understandable report cards for both parents and kids.
All right, Mr. Kenney, thank you. And we'll turn now to David Kahn. You have 45 seconds.
Education is the single most important thing for our children, for our grandchildren, and for our future. But Alberta is still plagued by overcrowded classrooms almost 2 decades after the province introduced class size guidelines. It's clear those haven't worked. Alberta Liberals will introduce mandatory class size caps and hire 2,000 more teachers to finally put an end to overcrowded classrooms in Alberta. We will also invest in inclusive education and mental health supports for children. We need to address the needs of all students and make our education system inclusive. The NDP plan to hire 600 teachers is not sufficient. It's not good enough to just be better than the last PC government on this issue.
All right, Mr. Kahn, thank you. That wraps up our time for individual statements. Let's move into free debate on education.
Well, you know, Mr. Kenney and many of his candidates have talked a lot about what they claim is our ideological curriculum. But let me just say, this is a curriculum that has been the product of consultations with over 100,000 Albertans. And it includes ideological ideas like how to be safe on the internet. So, you know, if that's Mr. Kenney and his team's idea of what's ideological, I can't imagine what they think common sense looks like. But the reality is that if you freeze education, it means that every year, 15,000 new kids come through our doors and they don't get a teacher. Now, I don't know about you, but I have had the experience of sitting around the table with my kids trying to walk them through a difficult problem or difficult homework. And the idea of having 60,000 kids by the end of a term come through our doors without a new teacher to teach them, without special assistance and educational assistance to support them, and having them in overcrowded classes, that makes me worry.
Okay.
Because you know what?
Mr. Kenney, jump in.
Education is their future.
A response from Mr. Kenney.
I'm going to agree with the Premier on a number of points. First of all, we do need smaller class sizes, but we should ask ourselves, where did the hundreds of millions of dollars spent on smaller class sizes end up, and why did it end up in larger class sizes? Surely before we spend more money, we should figure out where that money went. That's why we're going to do an audit. I also agree with the Premier, if I could, Premier, if I could. I also agree that we need to modernize the curriculum. We should include issues like ensuring that in the sexual education curriculum that consent is taught as a critical principle, and financial literacy is very important. And Premier, I also want to commend you and your government for having taken some steps towards reversing the decline in math outcomes, but it hasn't gone far enough. We need, I hope you'll agree with me, we need to end the failed experiment with Discovery Math and ensure kids are equipped for success using tried, true, and tested teaching methods like algorithms. We've also had decline in reading outcomes. I think we should emphasize things like phonics rather than inquiry whole language learning. So these are things that we would consider in our open and transparent curriculum review.
Okay, Mr. Mandel wants in on this.
There's no question we need more schools and more teachers for the K-12. But we also need to understand it's very important that early childhood education is part of what we're going to do in order to make sure our children, when they enter kindergarten, they're taken care of. You know, we propose to have an early childhood minister, which will bring the services together so that those kids can get a leg up when they start in their school years, especially when they enter as a new Canadian or as an individual that has some challenges. There's a lot that needs to be done, but we're not talking enough here about post-secondary.
True.
We really need to increase our game, increase our enrollment. We're one of the lowest in the country. We're about 45,000 under the average for our country with enrollment in post-secondary. If we're going to create a different economy, a more technologically advanced economy, we really need to invest in post-secondary.
Okay,
this is not going to be cheap either.
Jump in here, Mr. Mandel.
And we need to do it now.
Thank you. We've got about 2 minutes left in this question. I want to bring Mr. Khan in.
Alberta Liberals, we will track where that money is going. There's been money for class size reductions for years, and we do not know where it's gone.
Exactly.
We would be tracking that money down to the school and school board level to make sure that schools and school boards are accountable about how they're spending that money and that it's getting to the class and reducing the classroom sizes as it's intended. We'll also properly fund and track funding for inclusive education. Too many times, kids with autism or ADHD have special coding and special funding, but it doesn't follow the children. It disappears into school budgets. So we want to make sure that that money is going to where it's needed. We also do support the education curriculum update. It's been decades since the curriculum's been updated, and we shouldn't be using it as a political football just to score points.
Okay, we've got 1 minute left on this. I'm going to see if we can do this time. 30 seconds to Ms. Notley, and then the final 30 seconds to Mr. Kenney.
Absolutely. You know, here's how you cut class sizes. You hire teachers. If we had carried on with the plan put forward by Mr. Mandel and Mr. Kenney's predecessor party, there would be 4,000 fewer teachers in our classrooms right now. So we're going to fund enrollment, and we're going to keep hiring teachers. The other thing, as far as affordable as post-secondary goes, Mr. Mandel makes a very good point. What we've done is we've taken Alberta from being the most expensive place in Canada to pay tuition to one of the lowest in Canada.
I need you to wrap up that thought, Ms. Notley.
Huge affordability issue, and it's made access much easier.
Final word to Mr. Kenney.
I'm very excited about the Skills for Jobs agenda that we're putting forward to reinvent the vocational high school, to create NAIT Collegiate here in Edmonton and a similar one in Calgary, to encourage experiential and apprenticeship learning that bridges into post-secondary and to great careers, because we believe that the university degree has every bit as much value as a skilled trade certificate, and apprenticeship learning is just as good as academic learning.
Thank you, Mr. Kenney. Thank you to all of our leaders tonight. That brings our free debate to a close. Hopefully it has helped you form some opinions at home before you head to the polls. It's less than 2 weeks now. We aren't quite finished yet. Each leader has one more chance to vie for your support with their closing statement, and we'll hear those when we return.
All right, you've been watching and listening to the Alberta Election Leaders Debate on CBC TV, Radio 1. And online, I'm Rob Brown. We are now into the final commercial break, as Tara just said, of the debate, and the social media platforms, they are a-buzzing. The leaders were just talking education. Rabia writes on Facebook, this is 2019. Industry doesn't hire based on math scores. We need an updated education system so our kids are ready for the world. Anna writes, Kenney's entire platform is filled with threats against NDP, against Ottawa, against BC. No solutions, just threats. Karen writes, OMG, Notley, give us your plan, not your bashing of someone else. And Lois writes, I'm so sick of slamming others. Stand on your own merits. Do not try to build yourself up on the backs of everyone else. Open, honestly, and win those votes, not mudsling. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, head to either the CBC Edmonton or Calgary Facebook pages. We are streaming the debate there and would love to hear what you have to say. In fact, we could end up incorporating your comments into a special post-debate show that will come your way in less than 10 minutes' time on CBC TV, Radio 1, and online. As soon as the closing remarks are over, I'm going to be joined by a panel of pundits, including Calgary pollster Janet Brown. And Janet, you brought some guests along with you tonight.
I have. We did a great project for CBC this election. We put together a panel of everyday Albertans, 30 of them in total, and 3 of them came here to watch the debate tonight. The panel's not about predicting how the election is going to turn out, but it's talking to people about what issues they want to cover, how the campaign is rolling out for them. I've been in the back with them, lots of cheers.
Fly on the wall?
Lots of jeers, lots of excitement back there. They have a lot to say about this debate.
Looking forward to hearing that. Looking forward to chatting with you. Our eye in the legislature, Graham Thompson, and political strategist Najib Jutt coming up. So stick around here on CBC. See you soon.
Welcome back. You are watching the leaders' debate for the 2019 provincial election. We've heard from all 4 leaders on a wide variety of issues tonight, and it is now time for their closing statements, the order of which, again, we determined earlier by a draw. David Kahn, you are the first, and you have 1 minute starting now.
Mr. Kenney asked, are we better off now than we were 4 years ago? The answer is no. And we will be even worse off if the UCP takes over government. The Alberta legislature needs Alberta Liberal MLAs to keep both an NDP or a UCP government in check. The UCP is threatening to cut spending by 20%. We will not slash spending. We will keep a strong social safety net for all Albertans. The NDP is piling on debt. Albertans are paying $2 billion a year in interest payments alone. That money should be going to schools and hospitals. The Alberta Liberals will tackle that debt. We will fire up the economy with our pro-growth tax reforms. We will create more jobs. Alberta Liberals will make your life better. I give you my word.
Thank you, Mr. Kahn. Let's turn now to Mr. Kenney. You have 1 minute.
This election is about jobs, the economy, pipelines, and getting a fair deal for Alberta. I respect our premier, but the NDP is governed by a failed ideology. They raised taxes on everything, and they scared away investors. They made us the most overregulated economy in Canada, and they made an alliance with Justin Trudeau that's left us with nothing except a jobs crisis, a carbon tax, and no pipelines. We can't afford 4 more years of this. We can't afford a $100 billion debt, a 67% hike in the carbon tax, or surrendering to Trudeau's agenda. For all those Albertans who have lost their jobs, their businesses, their homes, and their hope, we need change. Please go to albertastrongandfree.ca to see our 375 positive ideas to get Alberta back to work, to protect our public services, and to stand up for Alberta. I ask for your support so we can renew the promise of Alberta as a land of opportunity that is strong and free.
Thank you, Mr. Kenney. Let's turn now to Ms. Notley. You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you very much. You know, it's been a good debate. Tonight and in my platform, I've laid out a plan to diversify our economy, to keep creating jobs, to fight for pipelines, to build on our record of cutting child poverty in half, and to bring our budget to balance responsibly. Now, right now, I know there are folks who are worried that my opponent is a bit too extreme, but they're still thinking about voting for him because they're worried about the economy. Well, I'm worried about the economy too, but that's something that he's counting on, and I'm here to tell you there is a better way. In Alberta, we can grow the economy, build a pipeline, create jobs, and not sacrifice who we are. Because who we are is the source of our strength. In Alberta, it doesn't matter where you came from, who your parents are, to whom you pray, or who you love. And as a great leader once said, all that matters is the content of your character. That is the Alberta that I am fighting for. Tonight, I ask for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Notley. And finally tonight, Mr. Mandel, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. To me, more than anything, the Alberta Party represents hope. Hope in our future, hope for a better tomorrow, especially for our children. That's what motivates me. My grandson, a special guy who's 6 years old, that means the world to my wife and myself. He's our everything. I want him to grow up in Alberta with opportunity, but also one that's fair and tolerant, where he can dream. That's the kind of Alberta we want to build. Get it back to a place you can come from anywhere and become almost anything. A place with opportunity and kindness. We can all chase our dreams. North and south, urban and rural, everywhere. That's what I offered tonight with the Alberta Party. Let's build the next Alberta together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel, and thank you to all of our leaders tonight for a lively, engaging, and interesting debate. Thank you to our panel of journalists for helping craft some questions that hopefully help our viewers and our listeners make some decisions. And thank you for watching. Remember to vote on April 16th or, of course, in the advance polls. And good night.
Good evening, I'm Rob Brown. Well, you've heard from the leaders, time to get some analysis. Welcome to this special post-debate broadcast here on CBC TV, Radio 1, and online. In the next half hour, we're going to drill down on some of the key moments in the debate. We'll get impressions from a panel made up of regular Alberta voters who've been participating in focus groups throughout the campaign, and we'll take the temperature of social media to find out what's driving the conversation there. If you'd like to join that conversation, by the way, leave us a comment on the CBC Calgary or Edmonton Facebook page. We're live streaming this program. We'd love to hear from you. But first, to our panel of pundits. Joining me here in studio is Calgary pollster Janet Brown. Hi, Janet.
Hi.
And in the Capitol, our eye on the legislature, Graham Thompson, and political strategist Najib Judd. Graham, why don't we start with you? You've seen a few of these over the years. And before we drill down on individual moments, just general impressions coming off this 90-minute debate.
It's a lot more lively than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be sort of a more tame affair, and they really got into it. It's interesting having David Kahn, of course, and Stephen Mandel trying to elbow their way into, because the big thing here was Notley versus Kenney. People are seeing them really for the first time actually on stage together. But you could see Kahn and Mandel trying to get in there. A lot more lively. You could see Kenney did well, but he was on the defensive a lot more than I thought he was going to be, because in a sense, even though he's not the premier, he is the front runner, it seems, in this race. So he became, in a sense, the hunted for a while. So that was really interesting. It wasn't just Notley under attack, it was also Kenney under attack.
Najib, if you had to pick a winner, and I could appreciate it just ended, who would you go with?
I think I would go with Mr. Kenney. I think even though he was being attacked and he was on the defensive and he seemed a little bit nervous right off the bat, I think he defended himself quite well. I think that he didn't go the attack route as much as the Premier did, which I think served him well. I think people tuned in today to see good leaders with good ideas, and I think they were a little bit tired of all the negativity. If I was to downgrade the Premier versus Kenney, I would downgrade her on that. It's just a little bit too much of the attack.
It's interesting because it's often the incumbents, and Rachel Notley would be that, who's under fire, and yet she did go on the attack. So, I mean, in terms of picking a winner, is it a case of, and we've seen this before, just don't make a mistake if you're the one out in front in the polls right now? And did Jason Kenney pull it off in your mind?
Well, this morning I thought, what does Jason Kenney need to do? Jason Kenney just needs to come across as a reasonable guy who doesn't come near the sort of hysteria that the NDP paint of him. So as long as he comes out as a decent guy and not the horrible guy they make him out to be, he would do okay. And I think he accomplished that. He came out of the gate way more aggressive than I thought he would. He certainly was playing to character. He wasn't trying to be nice, but at the same time, he didn't come off as this sort of, this evil genius, this crazy radical that Albertans need to be afraid of.
Okay, let's take a look and a listen to one of the key exchanges. And you mentioned Jason Kenney. He was himself at times aggressive. He was suffering some pretty withering attacks from all sides at times. And this is an exchange where he tried to turn the tables on Premier Rachel Notley. Rachel Notley then taking the opportunity to try and turn the tables in reverse. Have a listen.
What you've just said is, quite frankly, defamatory. But Premier,
10 seconds
why
to wrap
don't you
up,
tell us
please.
who are the two members of your caucus who have been under charges for serious sexual misconduct?
Ms. Notley, respond.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really sorry that you believe that people talking about your record is somehow negative campaigning. To me, it's talking about the facts. The leadership campaign of which you were a part is under RCMP investigation, Mr. Kenney. They are talking to the RCMP, who are investigating the wrongdoing. We have seen documents that have been released which show a clear connection between people in your campaign and Mr. Callaway's campaign. Is it normal for you do you think it's normal politics to run somebody as a kamikaze candidate in order to take down your most competitive
All right, we want to bring everybody in on this conversation, please, one at a time.
That is
one at a
quite
time.
clearly
Thank you.
the documents show us.
We want to bring everyone in on this conversation.
Okay, you got a feel for Tara Nelson there. A lot of crosstalk going on. Graham, a continuation there of what we've been hearing since day one from Rachel Notley with going after Jason Kenney, candidate controversies, kamikaze candidate. Do you think that stuff, when people are receiving this debate at home, do you think they're ticking it off and it's resonating and it's sticking to him?
Yeah, this is a problem because this has been an issue for the NDP from day one. Like, how hard do you go against Kenney on this? In fact, at one time tonight, she said that he cheated to win the leadership race. She's used that line before. When she launched her campaign, she said he had cheated and then lied about it. And the party, I think, understood that she can't go too negative on these things because they do have blowback. Yes, we've heard about the problems with Kenney in the leadership campaign in 2017, and right now there's still an investigation going on by the RCMP and the election commissioner. But the thing is, if you go too negative, it becomes a problem. And I got to say, part of the problem tonight, I think, was the format. A lot of crosstalk. People want to hear, we may in the media like to see them do a lot of crosstalk. It's a bit more lively, there's some friction going on, some tension. People want to actually hear the leaders talk about issues. I think too often tonight there was a lot of crosstalk, and sometimes the actual issue gets lost in that. They just look like they're just being mean to each other, and people are getting tired of negative politics. They want to hear some positive talk. They want to hear the leaders actually explain what they're actually going to do if they win the election.
Okay, well, we have the benefit of editing, so we can cut a lot of that crosstalk out. Let's take a listen to and a look at another exchange, again, this one between Rachel Notley and Jason Kenney. This is on Ottawa-Alberta relations, and it was the first opportunity for free debate in this debate, and Rachel Notley wasted no time. She jumped in right away. Take a listen.
Mr. Kenney, here's the thing. I find it very ironic that you're interested in suing the federal government over equalization when it was actually the Conservative government that you were a part of that actually wrote the formula that you currently want to sue over.
Premier, I respect your leadership, but you made a disastrous mistake with the alliance with Justin Trudeau. You sold Alberta down the river to your ally, Justin Trudeau.
The alliance between Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau. This is a line that we've been hearing a lot from Jason Kenney in recent days, in particular, Najib. In terms of whether or not it's sticking in the public's mind, is that an effective line of attack? Did he do well with it tonight?
Yeah, I think it is effective. I mean, considering what's happening on the federal stage with the Liberal Party, I think that's what he's trying to make those ties that, we have a provincial government that was tied in with that party. So I think it's effective. I don't, again, I find it strange that Premier Notley keeps attacking his record when, it's her party in power and she should actually be defending her record.
Janet, do you think tonight's debate will change the course of the campaign and I guess the election outcome?
Oh, it's the question I was asking myself during the last 10 minutes of the debate. And I'm going to say if anybody's fortunes were changed, it might have been Stephen Mandel's. He started the debate by saying, look, if you don't like these two, there is another alternative. And then he went back to that point at the end. And I think he came across, both David Kahn and Mandel held their own in a debate where it could have easily been drowned out. So probably they maybe have picked up some of those middle voters that don't feel they really had a place to go. But in terms of the other two leaders, I think their base would have loved what each of them were saying. I don't know that they would have won too many new people over with their messages.
You released a poll this week. Remind us, how many votes are there that are still undecided that are up for grabs? Do you have the percentage off the top of your head?
There were 12% of people in my poll that were undecided. I always caution people about making too many inferences about undecideds in polls. The true people who are undecided are the ones that never picked up the phone in the first place to answer the poll.
Good point.
But I think there is a lot of undecided voters out there, and there is a lot of soft vote. But I don't know that we would have changed the proportions very much with this debate.
Graham, I didn't hear a math is difficult quote. Yeah. I didn't see that moment personally tonight, in reference obviously to 2015 Prentice to Rachel Notley, which saw a bump in the polls afterwards for the NDP. Did you see a moment like that tonight, and do you think it'll make a difference to the eventual outcome of this election?
No, one moment, I think we had Mandel asking David Kahn if he was smoking something he shouldn't be smoking.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. They're actually attacking each other, even though you had Mandel, of course, attacking Kahn and vice versa. No, there was no moment like that. Those are kind of like once-in-a-generation moments in leaders' debates where they actually have a moment and you go, wow, that's changed everything. Didn't happen tonight. I think Janet was right earlier on when you're thinking what Kenney had to do was just show up, not appear aggressive or intolerant, and just stick to his speaking points. And of course, he did that. This is a guy, if you've been listening to him on the campaign trail, this is what you got again tonight. He's polished these lines down to a fine hone. So I think that we're seeing Notley as well get out of this okay. I think the leaders did what they had to do. I think Kahn did really well. This is somebody who's probably just really happy just to be invited to the party. And he got there and he did okay. The problem is, will it make a difference? I don't think it will. And same with Mandel. I think the issue here right now is, did Kenney lose ground tonight? And to me, he did not lose ground. He did okay. Notley did fine. We expected them to do fine. They did fine. It didn't really change anything.
Okay, Najeeb, so all of that said then, if the NDP, and we take it at face value, this poll that Janet released this week and others that we've seen, continue to trail the UCP, with the remaining less than 2 weeks left in this campaign, what can they do to turn this around if this was their best shot tonight?
Well, you know what? I think it's in the interest of both of the leading parties to narrow the gap. If your gap is too high as it is right now with the UCP, your supporters might decide to stay home, right, thinking that everything's in the bag. And if you're trailing too far behind as the NDP, then people think, oh, it's hopeless. What's the point? So I think it's in the interest of both parties to try to narrow that gap. I think that they've done a little bit of that today. I just struggle with. I don't think that anything new came out, any great ideas came out from either Premier Notley or Jason Kenney. I think I agree with Graham that David Kahn handled himself really well. I think in terms of content, probably he did the best job of showing the Liberal Party's platform. And, and we saw some of the old fiery Stephen Mandel as well, which was nice to see.
Before I move on to Janet, you say both parties need to narrow the gap. How are they going to do that? You're the strategist.
Sure. Yeah. I know. I think that with Premier Notley, I think they're going to keep doing what they're doing, which is focus on that younger market and the urban market, and keep talking about things that are important, like education and healthcare. They've already put in some plans like the subsidized daycares and the minimum wage, and defending the minimum wage, and they need to continue to do that. I think that their whole focus should be, and always has been, is on the urban market, and includes that smaller urban markets as well. And that's where they're going to make their gains. I think that they really need to stop the attack and focus on those ideas and win votes that way. Okay. And for Mr. Kenney, I think it's his election to lose. I think he needs to do what he's been doing all along too, is focus on his grassroots, make sure that he's still out there, keeping his head down, and ignore the mudslinging, which is what he's been doing as well.
Thank you, Najeeb. Najeeb mentioned some demographics there, and what really stood out, one of the many things that stood out in your poll this week, Janet, as we wrap up, is how fragmented the support is. Younger people, women for the NDP, older people, men for the UCP, urban versus rural. How fractured is this electorate going to be after the vote?
Yeah, and I made all the detailed tables for that poll publicly available, so people can go and find that online if they want. And it really is striking. We always look for demographic differences in polls, but rarely do you see an election where the type of people that are lining up behind each party are so categorically different. Our pal Jason Markusoff, I was on a panel with him the other day, and he made a prediction. He said whoever wins this election, 50% of voters are going to hate it.
Safe bet, Markusoff. All right, Janet Brown here in studio with me, Najib Jutt, a political strategist, and our eye on the legislature, Graham Thompson. Thank you so much for this, you three. Coming up next, we're going to assemble a special panel of Alberta voters to find out if this debate changed their minds. But before that, we got to pay some bills. We're going to take a quick TV commercial break. But for those of you listening on CBC Radio 1 and watching online, don't go away, because we'll continue the conversation right after this. And thanks for sticking with us. I still have Graham in Edmonton, I'm told, and Najib. So I want to go through some of the Facebook posts that we've been seeing come into our pages in the last little while. Jason Kenney, this is coming from Dempsey Sidlowski. Jason Kenney's new big thing: this is a smear. You're smearing me. No, JK, stop saying that. Just because someone is bringing things out that the people in your party have done does not make it a smear. Stop pandering. Graham, who do you think Mr. Dempsey is suggesting Jason Kenney is pandering to?
Well, that's just it, right? This is a question that Kenney has got a lot of conservative supporters. And we saw this week, of course, with this controversy over Mark Smith, his critic for education. Some tape came out from a few years ago. He had made some comments basically comparing gay love to pedophilia. But Kenney did not kick Smith off the campaign. In fact, he was defending him, saying, look, he's apologized for this. Let's move on from here. So Kenney has a base out there he does not want to alienate. And this is going on, you'll call it the fear and smear campaign. So he's saying basically whenever someone criticizes him or his campaign or a candidate, he is going to be there saying, this is unfair. And there's times it's fair criticism, but this is Kenney telling his base, don't worry, I'm not going to cave in. We'll be moving forward. We'll become government. And the question is going to be, of course, how much does he actually owe them when if he becomes premier?
All right, as the conversation continues on Facebook, Najib, one for you, this from Jess, who writes, Notley needs to campaign on her government record and stop bashing Kenney. This is something you were touching on, the remaining time left in the campaign. She spent 2 weeks bashing, to use Jess's term. Is there enough to put in the window on the record that might reinforce the messaging pre-writ periods that the government has accomplished stuff over the last 4 years, according to Notley?
Oh, I think there is, absolutely. I mean, I think in terms of their increase in the minimum wage, subsidized daycare, the changes that they've made to pharmacy and other healthcare, I think there's a lot that they have, but they just don't talk about it enough. And this has been the problem, I think, with the Notley government for the last 4 years. They don't talk enough and clearly make people aware of all of the great things that they have done. I think they have done. I mean, I think a little bit they've been, under the impression that they might have only 4 years, so they've done a little bit of knee-jerk reaction on a lot of things and maybe done them too quickly and with too broad of a swipe. But I think they do have a good record, and they should talk about that record more and defend that record.
Okay, Najib, we got about 20 seconds left. Ground game, you're a strategist. How effective do you think the NDP ground game is going to be versus the UCP? Got about 10 now.
I think that the UCP ground game is the one to watch, and it's going to be very, very powerful. And I think that one of the things that you can see with the UCP is that that's all they've been working on.
Okay.
They haven't been distracted, and you can see that the way that they got their candidates in.
This is so sad in our province that we're debating this over and over and over again. Mr. Kenney, yesterday, the challenges your Mr. Smith brought forward were terrible.
Mr. Kenney's caucus voted against Bill 24 when we brought it in. Moreover, in the last 3.5, his hand-picked education minister wrote a policy proposing to make it legal to fire teachers on the basis of their own sexual orientation.
This is not, as they characterize it, about outing gay children. That's offensive. No responsible teacher would ever reveal a child's sexual orientation. That's private information. But surely we should acknowledge that there may be cases where it's in the best interests of the child who may be bullied, who may be suffering from mental or emotional challenges, to engage the loving support of caring parents, and that parents should know if a kid's being taken out of the school for a field trip to a conference, for example.
All right, let's wrap up that thought.
All right, a polarizing debate and a night of high expectations for political watchers as the leaders of the UCP, NDP, Alberta, and Liberal parties squared off in a 90-minute debate. But will it make a difference to those who have to decide which party should form government? Throughout the campaign, CBC is sampling the opinion of a few focus groups made up of regular voters. 3 of the participants taking part in the Calgary focus group join us now. Tamara Keller describes herself as leaning a bit to the left, James Vai is closer to the center, and Don Roush is to the right of that. Tamara, why don't I start with you? And I want to just start with the question I put to the panel of political pundits off the top, your overall impressions of this debate.
Well, it was definitely started off, it was fired up, and we saw a lot of what I think we expected going into this, a lot of lobbying back and forth between Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley. And, you know, overall, I think that of the 4 up there, we really heard from Stephen Mandel really telling Albertans what he wants to do for Albertans. So
James is nodding his head. So you heard something there that drew you to the Alberta Party, and Mandel in particular?
I agree. What I was really looking for is people who are speaking from the heart. Right, and you know, I think if you rank them from best to worst, I think you see that Mr. Mandel spoke, you know, the most from his heart. He seemed the most genuine. And then next you had Rachel Notley, and then you had Jason Kenney, and then at last I think Mr. Khan came across as a little bit robotic and very like he was reading off a teleprompter, it seemed.
So did you hear anything there, James, I'll get to you in a sec, Don, that has you questioning how you've been feeling about particular parties or leaders up till now? And I ask you because you've been the most conflicted in the conversations we've been having up till now.
I have been the most conflicted, and I think I heard a lot of what I was expecting to see, but what really surprised me was, you know, was Mr. Mandel's performance, right? And, you know, I've really been struggling with the idea that, okay, well, am I going to be splitting the right, and am I going to be, you know, splitting my vote in strategic voting? But I think what it really came to tonight was the understanding that if someone's going to vote for the Alberta Party, it's not a wasted vote. And you know, there is that slight chance that there is the minority government that's formed, and maybe the Alberta Party holds a balance. And that's really a really good outcome for me in this election, because we can focus the different parties on the different issues, right?
Okay, Don, what's your takeaway from this debate?
It was very different. Very different. There was a lot of, I think at the start, there was a lot of fear-mongering being put out there. I found that some of the candidates did a lot of talking, and they never specifically said what they're going to do to make Alberta economic. And Ms. Notley kept talking about spending a lot of money on public services, but she didn't say where that was coming from, and she did no promotion for private enterprise. Mr. Mandel gave a nice framework for what his party represented, and I was impressed with Mr. Kenney's performance on what he plans to do.
Did you hear anything that would change your mind?
No.
Tamara, Don raises the fact that there was a lot of crosstalk, some fear-mongering. In terms of substance, being able to walk away from this 90 minutes and say, okay, I clearly know where these parties stand on these issues. Did you take that from this debate?
I think with the Alberta Party, there was definitely some clarity delivered. I think that Mr. Mandel did a fantastic job of doing that. I think that there really isn't any difference coming out of that. We knew, you know, Rachel Notley is really focused where she's focused at, and we know where Jason Kenney is really focused. And I don't think they changed that at all with this debate.
Sometimes it's not about the substance. Sometimes the research has told us it's simply about how the viewer receives people, whether they find them likable, or whether someone steps up and assumes the role of premier in a way that maybe the viewer hadn't seen them before. You've talked up Stephen Mandel. What did you make of tone, body language? Anything rub you the wrong way or push you in the other direction?
Not really. Like, I think what this comes down to for me is, you know, each candidate wants to frame what this election's about, right? The UCP wants to frame it as being an election on the economy, whereas Rachel Notley wants to frame it about integrity, right? And I think it's, again, I'm not pushed one way or another in that sense, but as much as I'd like us all to sit around and sing Kumbaya and, you know, all be nice to each other, there's some major skeletons in the closet for the UCP here, and, you know, talk about kamikaze candidates, and, you know, and I think all they really had to do in this election is stay on message. And
you sound like you're closer to knowing who you're going to vote for tonight.
I am, yeah.
And Dawn, you from the outset have known who you're going to vote for, and we don't have to get into the details on that. Is there anything at this point, with less than 2 weeks left, and we heard some of the controversies that have been erupting, that would make you change your vote?
Not really. I think you've got people that are for Mr. Kenney and people that are for Ms. Notley. And then you've got the middle that they're all going to be very different. Whatever fires them to select who they're going to vote for. It may be job security, it may be social issues, it may be the LGBTQ issues, those sort of things. What they got from this might have an impact on who they vote for.
And quickly, Tamara, are you closer to knowing how you'll vote on the 16th?
I'm closer to knowing than I was last week, but not necessarily based on the leadership debate.
Still some work to be done, which means I hope we have a chance to chat between now and then. You three, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a final pause as we break away for a quick TV commercial break, but we'll continue our conversation online and on CBC Radio 1 during that break. And when we come back, we're going to tell you about some additional debate coverage CBC is working on right now that I think you'll find interesting. Always interesting to hear what people think of an event that we all have, to some degree, in common. We've shared that 90 minutes together, and people take away from it what they will, depending on their different political positions, often going into the debate. Janet Brown, Calgary pollster, joins me again to go over some of the commentary we've been seeing on Facebook. This coming from Dawn. Janet, this is the scariest election so far. Watch what you wish for. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. Maybe this one. I think Con, this is coming from Candace, I think Con may have surprised many watching, myself included. And this from Gary, this is not a two-party election. How about you talk about the Alberta Party, which is something that both Tamara and James, who are participating in your focus group, mentioned. Stephen Mandel seemed to have made an impression.
He did, and when I said that sort of in the earlier segment, it's because I had the benefit of listening to them in the back room, and I could see that they really perked up there. David Kahn and Stephen Mandel have really been sort of like unknown quantities. When we did our poll, you know, the biggest response they got was, I don't have an opinion about them. So good night for them, because at least more people would have an opinion of them after tonight, and more people would have a positive opinion. But to that first question, I'm not afraid to tackle that one.
All right, take it on.
Why does this election seem so scary? Well, you know, in Alberta politics, we've rarely had two parties that are in such contrast, right? I mean, in the 2012 election, it looked like we were going to elect the Wild Rose, and then we sort of, you know, changed our mind. But, you know, jumping from the Wild Rose to the Progressive Conservative is maybe not quite as big an intellectual jump as going from the UCP to the NDP. So I think people are seeing the contrast in this election as more stark than we've seen them in past Alberta elections. And so it was interesting to see the focus group participants sort of like gravitate to the people in the middle, because that's where we're comfortable in Alberta, in the middle.
Well, if they gravitate to the point where they're actually going to cast ballots for them, and Stephen Mandel, maybe David Kahn, took some people off a fence, and maybe some people out of those camps that are really polarized in the NDP and the UCP right now, Could that impact this election? I mean, are we at a point now where they're going to siphon off? I don't know if a split is what we could be looking at on the progressive end of things.
You know, I still think, I still maintain that, you know, the UCP is in a position to get a majority government right now. What's at stake is how big their majority is going to be. You know, this debate won't do it, but unless other things come out this week that are even more scandalous than we've heard before, and then maybe do we want to start talking about a minority government? Well, you know, these third parties have to do good. They have to get a few seats so that a minority government is in play as a possibility. And so, you know, but this debate may have been good enough for both of these parties to get at least one seat. And if they get at least one seat, they live to fight another election.
David Kahn has already run before against Jason Kenney in a by-election. He's running in what was a Liberal riding, David Swan, so he's hoping at least that. And of course, there's Stephen Mandel for sure, who would like to be able to take a seat in the legislature as the leader, because the only seat they had going into this one was Greg Clark here in Calgary.
Well, no, they had more seats than that. They only won one in the last election. They had some floor crossers.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Janet, stand by. All right, there were a lot of promises and claims made by the leaders during the debate, and we think they deserve some scrutiny. So as I speak, our CBC team is working on a fact checker. And if you join us at 11 o'clock back here on TV, you'll see and you will hear how the leaders tried to frame their performances. Post-debate, they did scrums with the media, and you'll see our fact checker stacking up the facts against some of those claims and promises. Until then, here's a final look at some more of those memorable moments from tonight's leaders debate. Good night.
You know, fighting for this pipeline has been the fight of my life.
This government has left us with the faint hope of only one pipeline.
Ms. Notley, I was there when you promised in the legislature that shovels would be aground last summer. They're not there.
And I'm the only leader up here who's actually laid pipe in the Brooks area in one summer in my undergrad, so I've actually built a pipeline.
GSAs, gay straight alliances, save lives.
Parents should know if a kid's been taken out of the school for a field trip to a conference, for example.
We have the NDP that spent the first 2 weeks of the campaign attacking Mr. Kenney with attack websites. We have Mr. Kenney that attacks the Premier every day, claims that there's some Notley-Trudeau alliance. Albertans are sick and tired of this kind of rhetoric. They want to hear real solutions.
There's this divisiveness within our province that's scary.